I didn't sign up to marry a duke. I signed the wrong damn paper. Eliza Whitmore's hands were still shaking when the guard slammed the oak doors shut behind her. One signature. One careless moment in a crowded legal office, and now she stood trapped in the marble hall of England's most feared aristocrat, Duke Adrian Blackthorne, the man they called the Iron Duke. He didn't raise his voice. Didn't need to. His cold stare made it clear. The contract was binding, the marriage legal, and her life as she knew it, over. If you want to see how a single mistake can rewrite destiny, stick around until the end. Drop a like and tell me in the comments what city you're watching from. The rain hammered London's cobblestones like 1,000 angry fists that October morning. Eliza Whitmore pressed herself against the law office's brick wall, trying to keep her worn shawl from soaking through. Around her, merchants shouted, carriages splashed through puddles, and the city moved with the indifference of a machine that had no time for one more struggling woman. She clutched the envelope tighter. Inside were the last documents her dying mother had left, papers that would secure her younger sister Clara's guardianship and the tiny inheritance that could keep them fed for maybe 6 months. Maybe. "Miss, you're blocking the entrance." Eliza jerked aside as a gentleman in an expensive coat brushed past without looking at her. She'd been standing there for 20 minutes, working up the courage to walk through those doors. Legal offices weren't places for women like her. Daughters of failed merchants, wearing darned stockings and yesterday's breadcrumbs still caught in their skirt hems. But Clara needed this. Clara, who was 14 and brilliant and deserved better than the workhouse that waited if Eliza failed. She pushed the door open. The noise hit her first, a wall of sound that made her step back. The receiving hall was packed with people, all of them looking important, all of them looking like they belonged. Clerks shuffled between desks stacked with leather folders. Well-dressed men argued in clusters. A woman in silk sat near the window, dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief while her lawyer whispered urgently. Eliza's stomach twisted. Wrong place. She was in the wrong place. "You there, girl!" A clerk with ink-stained fingers grabbed her elbow. He couldn't have been more than 16, but he looked at her like she was dirt he'd tracked in on his shoe. "I have an appointment," Eliza said, trying to sound firm, "with Mr. Pemberton. About the Whitmore estate." "Whitmore?" The clerk's face showed no recognition. He shoved a stack of papers at her. "Wait over there. Sign where you see the marks. Pemberton's running 3 hours behind, but I—" "Over there!" He was already turning away, shouting at someone else. Eliza stood in the middle of the chaos, holding the papers like a shield. Every instinct screamed at her to leave, come back another day, but she'd already spent her last shilling on the cab here. Walking home would take 2 hours in the rain. She found a corner near a window and sat on a hard wooden bench. The papers the clerk had given her were dense with legal language that made her head hurt, lots of herewiths and parties of the first part. Her eyes glazed over. Focus. She needed to focus. Around her, the office churned. A man in a military uniform argued loudly about property boundaries. 2 lawyers nearly came to blows over a contract dispute. Someone's dog barked from inside a leather bag. "Ladies and gentlemen, please." A senior clerk stood on a chair, waving his arms. "We are aware we're behind schedule. The situation with His Grace's matter has created unexpected complications." His Grace. Eliza's attention sharpened. A duke was here? She glanced around, trying to spot anyone who looked ducal, whatever that meant. "Mr. Harrington's clients, please move to the East Room. Miss Caldwell's party, West Room. Everyone else, stay patient. We'll get to you." The crowd shifted like a disturbed anthill. Eliza pulled her shawl tighter, trying to become invisible. She just needed to sign the guardianship papers, get them witnessed, and go home to Clara. "You're still here?" The same ink-stained clerk appeared, looking annoyed. "I told you to sign." "I'm waiting for Mr. Pemberton to explain." "There's nothing to explain. Sign the documents, get them witnessed by the notary at that desk, and you're done. We don't have time for hand-holding today." He left before she could argue. Eliza looked down at the papers in her lap. The marks he'd indicated were there, small X's in the margins where signatures belonged. Her mother had taught her to read every word before signing anything, but the legal language was impenetrable, and the noise in the office made it impossible to concentrate. She glanced at the notary desk. The line was already forming. If she didn't move now, she'd be here until dark. Her hand found the pen in her bag. Her father's pen, one of the few things that hadn't been sold. The nib was worn but still good. Just sign it. Clara needs you to sign it. Eliza bent over the papers, found the first mark, and signed her name in careful script. Eliza Ann Whitmore. Then the second mark. Then the third. Her hand was moving to the fourth when someone slammed into the bench. "Watch it!" a man snarled. Papers flew everywhere. Eliza grabbed for them, but the crowd had become a surge. People pushing toward the East Room, someone important apparently arriving. She was on her hands and knees gathering scattered documents, her face burning as Boots stepped around her like she was furniture. "Here." A woman's gloved hand held out several sheets. "I think these are yours." "Thank you," Eliza gasped, taking them without looking up. By the time she'd collected everything and stood up, the woman was gone. Eliza's heart hammered. Had she gotten all the pages? She counted quickly. Yes, all there. She found the last unsigned mark and added her signature, then hurried to the notary desk before anything else could go wrong. The notary was an old man with spectacles that magnified his eyes to an unsettling size. He barely glanced at her. "Documents for witnessing?" Eliza handed them over. He shuffled through the pages, his expression never changing. Then he pulled out his stamp, pressed it onto an ink pad, and began marking each page with practiced efficiency. "That's done," he said, handing them back. "Next." "Wait, don't I need a copy?" "Copies are made downstairs." "Next!" Eliza was pushed aside by a heavy-set man with a waxed mustache. She clutched the papers and looked around for the stairs. Downstairs. Where was downstairs? "Miss Whitmore?" She turned. A different clerk, this one older with a worried expression, stood at her elbow. "Yes?" "Could you come with me, please? We need to verify something." Eliza's stomach dropped. "Is something wrong with the guardianship papers?" The clerk's face was pale. "Please, just come with me." He led her through the crowd, past the main desks, down a hallway she hadn't noticed before. The noise faded. Her footsteps echoed on polished wood. They stopped at a heavy door with brass fixtures. The clerk knocked twice. "Enter," said a voice from inside. A voice that made the hair on Eliza's neck stand up, cold, precise, and utterly without warmth. The clerk opened the door and gently pushed her forward. The room was different from the chaos outside. Quiet. Expensive. Dark wood paneling, leather chairs, a massive desk. Behind the desk sat a man who looked like he'd been carved from ice. Duke Adrian Blackthorne. Eliza had never seen a duke before, but she knew immediately that's what he was. Everything about him screamed power, from his perfectly tailored black coat to the way he held absolutely still, like a predator that didn't need to move to be dangerous. His hair was dark, his jaw sharp, his eyes the color of winter storms. Those eyes fixed on her with the intensity of a hawk spotting prey. "Miss Whitmore." His voice was quiet, but it filled the room. "Do you know what you've done?" Eliza's mouth went dry. I signed the guardianship papers for my sister." "No." He stood, and the room seemed to shrink. He was tall, taller than any man she'd ever met. "You did not." He moved around the desk with controlled grace and held up a document. The paper looked expensive, heavy. Official seals marked the bottom. "This," he said, "is a marriage contract. It bears your signature 3 times. The world tilted. "That's impossible," Eliza whispered. "I signed guardianship papers. For my sister Clara. Mr. Pemberton was supposed to—" "Mr. Pemberton," the Duke interrupted, "handles property law, not family matters. You were in the wrong office, and apparently no one bothered to check." Eliza's vision swam. She grabbed the edge of a chair to steady herself. "Then it's a mistake. Obviously it's a mistake. Just void it." "I cannot void it." He said it like he was discussing the weather. "The contract has been signed, witnessed, and sealed. Under English law, it is binding." "That's insane. That is law." Eliza's fear crystallized into anger. "I don't know what kind of sick game this is, but I'm not playing. I didn't agree to marry anyone, especially not—" She gestured at him, words failing. "I have a sister to take care of. I need those guardianship papers. I need to go home." The Duke's expression didn't change. Your guardianship papers were never filed. The documents you signed were part of my matrimonial arrangements, specifically the contract my solicitors prepared for Lady Catherine Ashford. Lady Catherine? Eliza's brain refused to process this. Then give them to her. I'll sign whatever I need to sign to undo this, but I am not— Lady Catherine, he said, cutting through her rising panic, has already been informed that the contract has been fulfilled with another party. She is, understandably, quite distressed. Good, she can have you. The words burst out before Eliza could stop them. For the first time, something flickered in the Duke's eyes. Not anger, something colder, amusement maybe, or contempt. That is not how this works, Miss Whitmore. Then tell me how it works. Eliza was shaking now, her hands clenched into fists. Because from where I'm standing, this is either a cruel joke or a nightmare, and either way, I'm waking up. The Duke studied her for a long moment. Then he walked to the window, hands clasped behind his back. I am the Duke of Blackthorn, he said quietly. My lineage traces back 400 years. My estates cover 3 counties. My name carries weight in Parliament, in court, and in every corner of English society. He turned to face her. I do not make jokes, Miss Whitmore, and I certainly do not make mistakes that can be simply undone. But I made a mistake, Eliza said, hating how her voice trembled. I made the mistake. I'll testify to that. I'll sign anything. The law does not care about your intentions, only your signature. He gestured to the contract, which appears 3 times, alongside the signature of my representative, in front of witnesses. The marriage is legal. That is the end of the discussion. No. The word came out stronger than she felt. No, this is insane. You can't just— People don't get trapped into marriages because of paperwork. This is 1884, not the Dark Ages. You'd be surprised what the law allows. He returned to his desk, sitting down with the careful precision of a man who controlled everything around him. However, I am not without mercy. I will give you 2 choices. Eliza's nails bit into her palms. I'm listening. Choice 1. You accept the marriage. You will be installed in my household as the Duchess of Blackthorn. You will receive all the privileges and protections that title affords. Your sister will be provided for, educated, housed, given every advantage. Despite everything, Eliza's breath caught. Clara, safe, educated, everything she dreamed of for her sister. And choice 2? She managed. The Duke's expression didn't change. I take you to court. I sue for breach of contract. You signed a legal document and now refuse to honor it. The case will drag through the legal system for years. You will lose, of that, I assure you, and you will be bankrupted by legal fees. Your sister will end up in the workhouse. You'll be publicly disgraced, unemployable, and homeless. The room spun. That's not a choice, Eliza said, her voice hollow. That's extortion. That, the Duke corrected, is reality. I suggest you learn to recognize the difference. For a long moment, Eliza just stared at him. At this man who sat in his expensive office in his expensive coat, wielding law like a weapon against someone who had nothing, who was nothing in his world. Clara's face flashed in her mind. Clara, who trusted her, who believed Eliza would keep them safe. If I agree, Eliza said slowly, what happens to me? You become my Duchess. You will live in Blackthorn Manor. You will attend necessary social functions. You will comport yourself with the dignity expected of your position. And if I don't want to? His eyes were flat. Then I suggest you develop better acting skills. Eliza's hands shook so badly she had to clasp them behind her back. You're a monster. I'm a duke, he said, as if they were the same thing. The world operates on contracts, Miss Whitmore. Power, obligation. You signed a document you didn't read. That was foolish. But it is done. Now you must live with the consequences. While you get what? A duchess you didn't choose? A wife who hates you? I get a legally bound spouse who will fulfill her duties. He stood again, clearly done with the conversation. Whether you hate me is irrelevant. I neither need nor want your affection. Then what the hell do you want? The question hung in the air. The Duke regarded her with that unsettling stillness, and for a moment Eliza thought she saw something shift behind his eyes, something that looked almost like disappointment, exhaustion, but it was gone in an instant. "I want," he said quietly, "what everyone in my position wants. Stability, order, the continuation of a legacy." He picked up a small bell from his desk and rang it once. "Your wants are significantly less complex. You want your sister safe. I can provide that. Everything else is negotiation." The door opened. A woman in a severe gray dress stood in the doorway. His housekeeper, Eliza guessed. "Mrs. Holloway will show you to your rooms," the Duke said, already turning his attention to papers on his desk. "A carriage will be sent to collect your sister tomorrow. You will be married in 3 days. The ceremony will be small. Registry office, minimal witnesses. I see no need for spectacle." "Wait," Eliza's voice cracked. "I haven't agreed yet." He looked up, and his expression was almost pitying. "Yes, you have. You're still standing here, aren't you? If you were going to refuse, you'd have walked out already." He returned to his papers. "Mrs. Holloway, ensure Miss Whitmore has everything she needs." "Your Grace." The housekeeper's voice was crisp, professional. She gestured to Eliza. "This way, miss." Eliza didn't move. Couldn't move. Everything in her screamed to run, to fight, to do anything except follow this woman into whatever nightmare awaited. But Clara's face stayed in her mind. Clara, with her bright eyes and quick laugh. Clara, who deserved more than poverty and fear. Eliza's feet moved. She followed Mrs. Holloway out of the office, down the hallway, back through the chaos of the main receiving area where people still argued over their meaningless little disputes. No one even glanced at her. No one knew that her entire life had just been traded away on a contract she'd never meant to sign. Outside, the rain had stopped. A carriage waited, black, expensive, with the blackthorn crest on the door. A footman opened it without meeting her eyes. "In you go, miss," Mrs. Holloway said, not unkindly. "It's a bit of a ride to the manor." Eliza climbed in because she had no other choice. The interior smelled like leather and old money. The seats were softer than her bed at home. The carriage lurched forward. Through the window, London slipped past. Streets she knew, corners where she'd bought bread, the park where she'd walked with Clara last spring. All of it familiar. All of it now part of a life that was already becoming memory. Mrs. Holloway sat across from her, hands folded primly. "His Grace can be, abrupt," she said after a while. "But he's a fair man. If you do your duty, you'll want for nothing." "My duty?" Eliza's voice sounded strange to her own ears. "I don't even know what that means." "You'll learn." The housekeeper's face softened slightly. "The manor's large, intimidating at first, but you'll find your place." "I didn't ask for a place in a manor." "No, I expect you didn't." Mrs. Holloway looked out the window. "But then, we rarely get asked what we want, do we? We just manage." The carriage rolled on. Eliza watched the city give way to countryside, rolling hills, distant estates, the kind of landscape she'd only seen in paintings. This was a different England, the England of lords and ladies, of inherited wealth and casual power. She didn't belong here. But Clara would be safe. That thought was the only thing keeping her from screaming. They arrived at Blackthorn Manor as the sun was setting. The house rose from the landscape like a stone fortress, all Gothic towers and stern windows, surrounded by grounds so vast Eliza couldn't see where they ended. It was beautiful in the way that powerful things are beautiful, magnificent and utterly indifferent to whether anyone admired it. The carriage stopped at the main entrance. Footmen appeared like magic, opening doors, lowering steps. Mrs. Holloway climbed out first, and Eliza followed on shaking legs. "Welcome to Blackthorn Manor, miss," the housekeeper said. "Your new home." Eliza looked up at the towering facade, at the dozens of windows that stared down like eyes, at the massive oak doors that could swallow a person whole. Home. The word had never felt more like a lie. But she straightened her shoulders, lifted her chin, and walked forward into the manor that would be her cage, her prison, her life. Behind her, the carriage pulled away, taking with it the last connection to the woman she'd been that morning, the hopeful girl who thought she could save her sister with a simple signature. That girl was gone. Whoever she became next would have to be stronger, smarter, harder. Because one thing was already clear. Duke Adrian Blackthorne expected obedience, and Eliza Whitmore had never been very good at doing what she was told. The first night in Blackthorne Manor, Eliza didn't sleep. She lay in a bed 3 times the size of the one she'd shared with Clara, staring at a ceiling decorated with plasterwork that probably cost more than her father's entire estate had been worth. The sheets were silk. The room was warm. A maid had unpacked the pitiful contents of her bag: 2 dresses, some undergarments, a hairbrush missing half its bristles, and hung them in a wardrobe that could have housed a family of 4. Everything was perfect. Everything was wrong. At dawn, she gave up on sleep and went to the window. The grounds stretched out in manicured perfection, gardens that looked like they'd been designed by someone who'd never gotten dirt under their fingernails, lawns so precise they seemed mathematical. In the distance, she could see workers already moving through the fields. The estate ran like clockwork, indifferent to whether its new duchess was having a breakdown. A knock at the door made her jump. "Miss?" It was the young maid, Sarah, she'd said her name was. "Mrs. Holloway says you're to come down for breakfast. His Grace is waiting." Of course he was. Eliza dressed in her better of the 2 dresses, a gray wool that had been darned in 3 places. Sarah offered to help with her hair, but Eliza waved her off. She could manage a simple braid. She didn't need servants hovering. The breakfast room was on the ground floor, down a hallway lined with portraits of stern-faced ancestors who all seemed to be judging her. She could feel their eyes following her. This is the new Duchess? This nobody in the mended dress? Adrian was already seated at a table that could have accommodated 20 people. He was reading a newspaper, a cup of coffee at his elbow, looking as composed as if he hadn't just destroyed someone's life the day before. He glanced up when she entered. "Sit." Not "good morning," not "how did you sleep," just sit, like she was a dog being commanded. Eliza sat. A footman immediately appeared with a plate of food: eggs, toast, bacon, things she hadn't seen in months. Her stomach growled, betraying her. She ignored the food. "You need to eat," Adrian said, not looking up from his paper. "I'm not hungry." "I didn't ask if you were hungry. I said you need to eat." He turned a page. "You're too thin. It reflects poorly on the household." Heat flooded Eliza's face. "I'm too thin because I've been rationing food to keep my sister fed. Apologies if my poverty is inconvenient for you." That got his attention. He lowered the paper, fixing her with those cold eyes. "You are no longer poor, Miss Whitmore. You are a duchess. Or you will be in 2 days. I suggest you begin acting like one." "I don't know how to act like a duchess." "Then learn quickly." He went back to his paper. "Mrs. Holloway will instruct you on household matters. A seamstress will arrive this afternoon to begin your wardrobe. You'll need appropriate attire for the ceremony and for public appearances." "Public appearances? Did you imagine you'd hide in your room indefinitely?" He sipped his coffee. "I have obligations, social functions, parliament sessions when I'm in London. You will accompany me when required." Eliza's hands clenched in her lap. "So I'm to be your ornament, your property, paraded around to prove you have a duchess. You're to be my wife." He said it like he was explaining basic arithmetic to a slow child. "This is what wives do." "Not the wives I know." "You don't know any wives of my station." He finally set down the paper, regarding her with something that might have been curiosity. "Tell me, Miss Whitmore, in your former life, what exactly did you do all day?" The question caught her off guard. "I managed our household, what was left of it, kept the accounts, did the marketing, the cooking, the cleaning." "You kept accounts?" "Someone had to. My mother was sick for 2 years before she died. I handled everything." Something flickered across his face, too quick to identify. "Can you read? Write? Do mathematics?" Eliza bristled. "My father believed in education. I can read Latin, do figures faster than most merchants, and I've read more books than are probably in your library." That was a lie. His library likely held thousands, but the flash of surprise in his eyes was worth it. "Interesting," he said quietly. Then he stood, brushing invisible wrinkles from his coat. "I have estate business this morning. You're free to explore the house. Don't go into the east wing. That's my private study and chambers. Everything else is available to you." He walked toward the door, then paused. The seamstress arrives at 2. Don't be late. And he was gone. Eliza sat alone in the enormous breakfast room, surrounded by more food than she could eat in a week, feeling smaller than she'd ever felt in her life. She forced herself to eat, not because he'd told her to, but because starving herself wouldn't help anything. The eggs were perfect. The toast was still warm. The bacon was crisp. It all tasted like ashes. After breakfast, she did explore. The house was a labyrinth, drawing rooms and sitting rooms, a ballroom with chandeliers that looked like frozen waterfalls, a music room with instruments she couldn't name. Everything was beautiful. Everything was cold. She found the library by accident, taking a wrong turn on the second floor. It was the first room that didn't feel like a museum. Books lined every wall, floor to ceiling. There was a ladder on rails for reaching the high shelves. A fire burned in the grate, and worn leather chairs sat in pools of light from tall windows. Someone actually used this room. Eliza ran her fingers along the spines. Philosophy, history, law, science, poetry tucked in between dense legal texts. It was a strange collection, half scholarly, half human. She pulled out a volume of Dante and opened it. Notes in the margins. Someone had been annotating, arguing with the text in cramped handwriting. Adrian's handwriting, she realized. He'd written naive romanticism next to a passage about Beatrice. Despite everything, Eliza almost smiled. Of course he'd find fault with Dante's idealism. You shouldn't be in here. She spun around. A woman stood in the doorway, tall, elegant, wearing a blue dress that probably cost more than Eliza's father's house. Her face was beautiful in a sharp, calculated way. Her eyes were ice. I'm sorry, Eliza said, putting the book back quickly. I was just snooping? The woman walked in like she owned the place. How very provincial. And you are? Lady Catherine Ashford. She smiled, and it didn't reach her eyes. I believe you have something that belongs to me. The woman Adrian was supposed to marry. Eliza's stomach dropped, but she forced herself to stand straight. If you mean the Duke, I assure you I didn't... Spare me. Catherine's voice could have cut glass. I know exactly what you did. You signed papers you didn't understand, and now you're playing Duchess in my house. This isn't your house. It should have been. The composure cracked. Catherine's face flushed with real anger. Do you have any idea what you've destroyed? I've been preparing for this marriage for 3 years. 3 years. My family, Adrian's family, everything was arranged. And then some little nobody stumbles in and ruins everything because she can't read legal documents. The words hit like slaps, but Eliza held her ground. You think I wanted this? You think I woke up yesterday planning to marry a duke who treats me like furniture? You got exactly what every desperate girl in England wants. Catherine stepped closer, her perfume overwhelming. A title, wealth, power, and you didn't even have to work for it. I would give it all back in a heartbeat if I could. Catherine laughed, a brittle, horrible sound. You stupid little fool, you have no idea what you have, what you've taken from me. Then take it back. Eliza's control snapped. I'll sign whatever you want. I'll testify that I made a mistake. I'll go to court, to Parliament, to whoever decides these things. It doesn't work that way. Catherine's anger had crystallized into something colder. Adrian would never allow the scandal. The Blackthorn name doesn't tolerate public humiliation. You're stuck with him, and he's stuck with you, and I... She turned away, her shoulders rigid. I've been dismissed like a servant. For a moment, Eliza actually felt sorry for her. Then Catherine turned back, and the sympathy evaporated. But don't worry, Catherine said softly. Everyone in society will know exactly what you are. A mistake, an embarrassment. You'll be eaten alive at the first ball you attend, and Adrian will regret ever letting this farce continue. She swept out of the library like a departing storm. Eliza stood there, shaking, the book of Dante still in her hand. She wanted to throw it, to scream, to run back to London and her tiny apartment in Clara, where things were hard, but at least they made sense. Instead, she sank into one of the leather chairs and tried not to cry. The seamstress arrived at 2 on the dot. A tiny French woman named Madame Rousseau, who looked at Eliza's current dress with barely concealed horror. Mon Dieu, she muttered. We have much work to do. She measured Eliza from every angle, making little tisk sounds of disapproval. Then she pulled out fabric samples, silks and satins and brocades in colors Eliza had only seen in paintings. "For the wedding, something simple," Madame Rousseau said. "Elegant. Ivory silk, I think. And for every day we do walking dresses, morning dresses, dinner gowns." "How many dresses does one person need?" The seamstress looked at her like she'd asked why the sky was blue. "You are a duchess. You will need at least 30 to start." 30 dresses. The number was obscene. The fitting went on for 3 hours. By the end, Eliza's head was spinning with terms she didn't understand: day bodices and evening trains and visiting ensembles. Madame Rousseau promised the wedding dress would be ready by the ceremony. The rest would come in stages. When she finally left, Eliza felt wrung out. She was heading back to her room when she heard voices, angry voices, coming from a half-open door down the hall. She shouldn't eavesdrop, she knew that. But one of the voices was Adrian's, and she'd never heard him sound anything but coldly controlled. Now he sounded furious. "Don't care what the tenants think," he was saying. "The rents are staying where they are." "But your grace, the harvest was poor this year." An older man's voice, placating. "If we raise rents now, some families will starve." "Then they should have planned better." Eliza's hand tightened on the doorframe. "With respect," the older man said carefully, "your father always considered the welfare of—" "My father is dead." Adrian's voice went flat. "I am the Duke now. The estate operates at a loss because of his sentimentality. That ends? Raise the rents by 15%, effective immediately." "Your Grace, this discussion is over, Pembroke. You have your orders." Footsteps approached the door. Eliza scrambled back, but not fast enough. Adrian emerged and nearly collided with her. "Listening at doors?" His eyebrow raised. "How terribly common." "You're going to starve your own tenants?" The words came out before she could stop them. 15% when the harvest failed? This is none of your concern. It's my concern if I'm about to be the duchess of an estate that treats its workers like cattle. His eyes went dangerous. "You've been here less than a day, and you presume to tell me how to run my estates? I presume to tell you that raising rents on starving families is monstrous. It's business." He moved past her, but she grabbed his arm. "It's cruelty." Adrian looked down at her hand on his sleeve, then back at her face. For a moment, she thought he might actually hit her. Instead, he very deliberately removed her hand. "You don't understand how estates work," he said quietly. "You don't understand economics, or obligations, or the realities of maintaining properties this size. You understand poverty and sentiment, neither of which will keep Blackthorn Manor operational." "I understand numbers," Eliza shot back, "and I understand that squeezing people who have nothing will get you nothing but rebellion and resentment." "Then it's fortunate I don't require their affection, only their rent." He started to walk away. "What if I won't let you do this?" He stopped, turned. "Excuse me?" Eliza's heart hammered, but she stood her ground. "I'm going to be your duchess. Doesn't that give me any say in how this estate is run?" "No." "Then what's the point of me, besides standing in your shadow looking decorative?" Adrian studied her for a long moment. "The point of you, Miss Whitmore, is to produce heirs and maintain appearances. Estate management is my domain. I suggest you focus on learning which fork to use at dinner and leave business to those who understand it." He walked away before she could respond. Eliza stood in the hallway, trembling with rage. Around her, the portraits of dead Blackthorns seemed to smirk. "See? You don't belong here. You never will." That night, she skipped dinner. Let him eat alone in his enormous dining room. She wasn't hungry anyway. But she couldn't sleep. The rent increase gnawed at her. She'd seen what happened when landlords squeezed too hard. Families evicted, children going hungry, desperation breeding the kind of anger that ended in violence. Around midnight, she gave up on sleep and lit a candle. If she was going to be stuck in this prison, she might as well understand it. She found her way back to the library, pulled out books on estate management, and started reading. The Eastern Counties Rental Structure, Historical Precedents for Tenant Agreements, Harvest Yield Calculations. It was dry, dense material, but Eliza had always been good with numbers, and what she found made her blood boil. The estate wasn't operating at a loss because of low rents. It was bleeding money because of mismanagement, Bloated household staff, expensive improvements to the manor that served no purpose, investments in ventures that any fool could see were doomed to fail. The tenants weren't the problem. Adrian's spending was. She was so absorbed in the ledgers that she didn't hear him enter the library. "What are you doing?" Eliza jumped, nearly dropping the heavy book of accounts. Adrian stood in the doorway in his shirt sleeves, looking less composed than she'd ever seen him. His hair was mussed. He looked tired. "Reading," she said, recovering her composure. "Those are private estate records. They're in the library. If they were private, maybe you should have locked them away." She set the book down. "Your estate isn't operating at a loss because of tenant rents." "I beg your pardon?" "You heard me." Eliza stood, crossing to where he stood. "The problem is here." He pointed to an entry in the accounts. "You're paying for a full stable staff, even though you only use a quarter of the stables. And here," another page, "you renovated the West Ballroom last year for £12,000. When was the last time you actually held a ball?" Adrian's jaw tightened. "Those decisions were made for good reasons." "Were they?" "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're maintaining appearances you don't even use while squeezing the people who actually work your land." "You've been reading ledgers for 3 hours and think you understand centuries of estate management?" "I understand basic accounting, which apparently is more than whoever advised you on that investment in the coal venture." She flipped to another page. "That lost you £8,000 last quarter alone." "That venture was recommended by experts. Experts who probably got a commission for the sale." Eliza couldn't believe her own boldness, but the numbers were right there in black and white. "Cut your household expenses by 20%, divest from the failing investments, and you could actually lower tenant rents while still turning a profit." Adrian stared at her like she'd grown a second head. "You're insane." "I'm right. You know I'm right." For a long moment they faced each other in the firelight. Then Adrian moved forward, so close she could see the silver flecks in his gray eyes. "Even if you were correct," he said quietly, "which I'm not conceding, what makes you think I would take advice from someone who couldn't even sign the right legal document?" The words hit harder than a slap. Eliza felt her face burn. "Fine," she said, her voice shaking. "Raise the rents, bleed your people dry, but when they're too weak to work your fields and your estate collapses anyway, remember that someone tried to tell you the truth." She pushed past him, heading for the door. "Wait." She stopped but didn't turn around. "These calculations." His voice was different, not warm, but less cold. "Show me your work." Eliza turned slowly. Adrian was looking at the ledger, his expression unreadable. "Why? So you can tell me I'm wrong again?" "So I can verify your numbers." He pulled out a chair. "Sit." They sat across from each other at the library table, the ledgers spread between them. For the next 2 hours, Eliza walked him through her findings. Adrian challenged her on every point, questioning her assumptions, demanding proof, pushing back hard. But he listened. And slowly, his expression changed. "This investment here," he said finally, pointing to the coal venture. "My solicitor assured me it was sound." "Your solicitor gets a percentage of all investments he recommends, doesn't he?" Adrian's silence was answer enough. "People lie to you," Eliza said quietly, "because you're a duke. Because disagreeing with you is dangerous. But numbers don't lie. And these numbers say your estate is being robbed by the people you trust." Adrian sat back, running a hand through his hair. For the first time, he looked uncertain. "If what you're saying is true," he said slowly, "then I've been a fool." "You've been lied to. There's a difference." "Is there?" He laughed, a bitter sound. "My father always said never trust anyone. I thought he was being paranoid. Turns out he was right." Eliza studied him in the firelight. This man who'd been so cold, so controlled. Underneath it all, he was just trying not to drown. "You could fix this," she said. "Cut the waste. Invest in your tenants instead of in schemes that only benefit London con men. The estate could thrive. And you could help me do this." It wasn't quite a question. "I could, if you'd let me." Adrian was quiet for a long time. Then he closed the ledger with a decisive snap. "No rent increase," he said. "Not yet. but I'm auditing every expense, every investment, every person on the household payroll. He looked at her directly. And you're going to help me. Why? Because apparently, you're the only person in this entire estate who's willing to tell me the truth. He stood. Tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock. We start reviewing everything. I'm supposed to be learning to be a duchess. You are. The ghost of a smile touched his lips, the first she'd seen. Duchess of Blackthorn means understanding this estate. Seems you're already better at it than I am. He left her sitting there, surrounded by ledgers and the dying fire. Eliza should have felt triumphant. She'd won. He'd listened. She'd actually changed his mind about something. Instead, she felt exhausted and terrified. Because now she wasn't just trapped in this marriage. She was tangled up in the machinery of running an estate. And if she was wrong about any of this, people would suffer. But she wasn't wrong. She knew she wasn't. The numbers didn't lie. The next morning, Eliza was in the library at 7:30, the ledgers already open. Adrian arrived at 8 on the dot, carrying more record books. I pulled the household accounts going back 5 years, he said without preamble. We're going line by line. They worked through breakfast, then lunch. Mrs. Holloway brought food on trays that neither of them touched. The pile of flagged entries grew. Duplicate payments, inflated invoices, staff positions that didn't seem to actually exist. How did this happen? Adrian demanded, staring at a payment for 3 groundskeepers who apparently no one had ever seen. How did my own steward steal from me for years without anyone noticing? Because no one was looking, Eliza said. You trusted him to manage everything while you focused on what? Parliament, London society. My father's will stipulated I had to maintain the estate exactly as he'd run it. I thought that meant keeping all his staff, all his arrangements. Adrian's face was grim. I was honoring his memory by letting thieves bleed us dry. By late afternoon, they had a list of staff to dismiss, contracts to void, and investments to liquidate. The amount of money that would be recovered made Eliza's head spin. This is enough to lower rents by 10%, she said, running the calculations, and still increase the estate's profit margin. Adrian leaned back in his chair, looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Where did you learn to do this? My father's business failed because his partner was embezzling. I helped uncover it. Too late to save the company, but I learned to spot the patterns. She gestured at the ledgers. Same theft, different scale. You're wasted as a duchess. Then what should I be? I don't know. He said it like it bothered him. But someone with your mind shouldn't be spending her life managing flower arrangements and seeding charts. That's all your world allows women to do. My world is about to change. Adrian stood, gathering the flagged documents. Tomorrow, I'm calling a meeting with my steward, my solicitor, and my household manager. You'll be there. They'll hate me for it. They already hate you. Might as well give them a reason. Despite everything, Eliza almost laughed. You know, for a man who seemed like a complete monster 2 days ago, you're slightly less terrible than I thought. How flattering. But his tone was dry, almost amused. Don't mistake pragmatism for kindness, Miss Whitmore. You're useful. That's why I'm listening. The moment you stop being useful, you'll go back to treating me like furniture. I understand. He paused at the door. The wedding is tomorrow. Are you prepared? To sign my life away in a registry office? I've had worse days. It will be brief, efficiently done. Then we can both return to our respective duties. Romantic. I don't do romance, Miss Whitmore. I do contracts, legal obligations, mutually beneficial arrangements. Is that what our marriage is? Mutually beneficial? Adrian looked at her for a long moment. It could be. If we both stop fighting what it is and start working with what we have. After he left, Eliza sat alone in the library, watching the sun set through the tall windows. Tomorrow, she'd officially become the Duchess of Blackthorn. She'd stand in front of witnesses and legally bind herself to a man who viewed her as a useful tool at best. But she'd also discovered something unexpected. She was good at this. Understanding estates, finding patterns, solving problems. For the first time since signing that damned contract, she felt like she had a purpose beyond just surviving. The door opened. Mrs. Holloway appeared, looking concerned. Miss, you should rest. Tomorrow will be a long day. Mrs. Holloway, can I ask you something? Of course, miss. The staff. How much do they know about the financial situation? The housekeeper's face grew guarded. We know His Grace has been concerned about expenses. They're stealing from him. The steward, probably half the management staff. They've been doing it for years. Mrs. Holloway went pale. Miss, that's a serious accusation. I can prove it. We found the duplicate payments, the fake positions, everything. Eliza stood. Tomorrow, after the wedding, there's going to be a reckoning. People will be dismissed. It's going to get ugly. What are you asking me? I'm asking if the household staff, the real ones, the ones actually doing the work, if they'll stand with me when it happens, or if they'll see me as the outsider causing trouble. Mrs. Holloway studied her for a long time. You care what we think? You're the people who actually keep this place running, so yes, I care. The housekeeper's expression softened. Most of the staff are good people, miss. Honest. They'll be glad to see the rot cut out, even if it means some hard days ahead. She paused. But there will be those who benefit from the current chaos, who take their own small cuts. They won't go quietly. I didn't expect them to. Then you'd better be ready for war, miss. Because that's what this will be. After Mrs. Holloway left, Eliza returned to her room. The wedding dress hung in the wardrobe, ivory silk, simple and elegant, exactly as Madame Rousseau had promised. It was beautiful. It represented everything she'd never wanted. But as she touched the soft fabric, Eliza realized something had shifted. She wasn't just a victim anymore, trapped by a signature she'd never meant to give. She was becoming something else, something sharper, something that could fight back. Tomorrow, she'd marry a duke who didn't love her. But she'd also begin dismantling the corruption eating his estate from within. And maybe, just maybe, she'd prove that the overlooked girl in the mended dress was more dangerous than anyone had imagined. She lay down in the enormous bed, and for the first time since arriving at Blackthorn Manor, sleep came easily. In the morning, everything would change. She was ready. The registry office smelled like old paper and resignation. Eliza stood in her ivory silk dress, hands cold despite the gloves Madame Rousseau had insisted she wear, and listened to a clerk with a monotone voice read words that would legally bind her to a man she'd known for 3 days. Adrian stood beside her in perfect formal attire, his face expressionless. He could have been signing a business contract for all the emotion he showed. Do you, Adrian Charles Blackthorn, take this woman? I do. No hesitation, no warmth, just 2 words that sealed her fate. And do you, Eliza Ann Whitmore, take this man? Eliza's throat closed. Every instinct screamed to run, to bolt through that door and disappear into London's crowded streets where dukes and contracts couldn't follow. But Clara's face filled her mind. Clara, who was being collected from their old apartment today. Clara, who would have a future now instead of a workhouse. I do. Her voice didn't shake. She was proud of that. The clerk pronounced them married. Adrian signed the register with his usual precision. Eliza's signature looked shaky next to his, but it was done. Mrs. Holloway and Pembroke, Adrian's estate manager who'd soon be fired, served as witnesses. They signed. The clerk stamped everything with bureaucratic finality. Congratulations, the clerk said, already reaching for the next couple's paperwork. That was it. No flowers, no music, no kiss, just legal documentation and the quiet sound of a trap closing. Outside, Adrian helped her into the carriage without looking at her. We need to return to the manor immediately. The staff meeting is in 2 hours. On our wedding day. We don't have the luxury of sentiment, miss. He caught himself. Duchess. The thieves in my household won't wait for us to celebrate. Duchess. The word sounded foreign. Wrong. The carriage started moving. Eliza watched London disappear behind them, taking with it the last remnants of the person she'd been. Your sister will arrive this afternoon, Adrian said, pulling out papers from his coat. I've arranged for a governess. A good one. She'll begin Clara's education immediately. Thank you. The words came automatically, but Eliza meant them. Can I see her when she arrives? Of course, she's your sister, not a prisoner. He glanced up from his papers. Though I'd appreciate it if you didn't fill her head with ideas about the injustice of our marriage. It accomplishes nothing. I wouldn't do that to her. Wouldn't you? His eyes were sharp. You seem quite accomplished at finding injustice everywhere you look. Maybe that's because it's actually there. Adrian went back to his papers without responding. They rode in silence until the manor came into view. The staff meeting was held in the Great Hall, a room usually reserved for formal occasions, now repurposed for what was essentially a trial. Adrian sat at the head of a long table. Eliza took the chair beside him, very aware of the stares from the assembled household staff. 20 people filled the room. Some looked curious. Most looked hostile. Adrian's steward, Edmund Pembroke, sat near the front, his face carefully neutral. He was a heavy-set man in his 50s with the kind of smile that never reached his eyes. "Thank you all for coming," Adrian began. "As you know, I've recently married. The new Duchess and I have been reviewing the estate's finances." Uncomfortable shifting, exchanged glances. "We've discovered some irregularities," Adrian continued. "Payments for services never rendered, staff positions that don't seem to exist, investments that benefit certain parties more than the estate itself." Pembroke's smile didn't waver. "Your Grace, if I may, these are complex matters. Perhaps we should discuss them privately rather than alarm the household staff." "I'm not alarming them. I'm informing them." Adrian's voice went cold. "Because several of them are complicit in stealing from this estate." The room erupted, voices overlapping, denials, accusations. Adrian let it go on for exactly 10 seconds before slamming his hand on the table. Silence fell like a hammer. "Mr. Pembroke," Adrian said quietly, "can you explain why the estate has been paying wages to 3 groundskeepers who no one has actually seen in 5 years? There must be some confusion in the records." "There's no confusion. The payments are clearly documented. They go into an account that you control." Adrian pushed a ledger across the table. "Your signature is on every authorization." Pembroke's face went red. "This is preposterous. I've served this estate for 30 years and stolen from it for at least 5. Eliza cut in. She stood pulling out the papers she and Adrian had prepared. "The groundskeepers are just the beginning. There's also the matter of the coal investment, the one that lost £8,000 last quarter. The investment firm that handled it, partially owned by your brother-in-law." Pembroke's face went from red to white. "You can't prove—" "We can." Adrian's voice was ice. "We have bank records, correspondence, witness testimony from staff members who were pressured to falsify reports." He nodded to Mrs. Holloway, who stood near the back. She came forward, her face pale but determined. "I kept copies," the housekeeper said quietly, "of the real accounts. The ones before Mr. Pembroke corrected them. I didn't know what to do with them, but I kept them, just in case." Pembroke lunged to his feet. "You lying—" "Sit down!" Adrian didn't raise his voice, but the command in it was absolute. "Or I'll have you removed." Pembroke sat, but his eyes were full of rage. "You're dismissed," Adrian said. "Effective immediately. You have until sunset to remove your belongings from the estate. Any attempt to return will result in prosecution." "You can't do this!" Pembroke's composure shattered completely. "I have connections. The Earl of Waverley is my cousin. He'll hear about this treatment." "The Earl of Waverley," Eliza said, consulting her notes, "also received kickbacks from the investments you recommended. We have documentation of those payments too. If he'd like to make this public, we're happy to oblige." The threat landed. Pembroke's mouth worked soundlessly. "Get out," Adrian said. 2 footmen appeared, younger men, loyal to Adrian, and escorted Pembroke from the room. His protests echoed down the hall until a door slammed shut. Adrian turned back to the remaining staff. "Anyone else involved in these schemes has until tomorrow morning to confess. Those who come forward will be dismissed without prosecution. Those who don't—" He let the silence finish the sentence. The meeting dissolved into chaos again, people protesting innocence, others whispering frantically. Eliza caught Mrs. Holloway's eye across the room. The housekeeper gave her a small nod. One battle won, but Eliza could feel the hatred radiating from certain quarters of the room. She'd made enemies today, powerful ones. That night, Clara arrived. Eliza heard the carriage and ran, actually ran, her new Duchess propriety forgotten, down the front steps to meet it. Clara emerged looking small and scared, and so painfully young that Eliza's heart cracked. Her sister wore the same patched dress she'd left in, carrying a bag that held everything she owned. "Eliza?" Clara's voice trembled. "What's happening? The men who came said you'd married a duke, but that's impossible." Eliza pulled her into a fierce hug. "It's complicated. I'll explain everything. But you're safe now. You're going to be safe." Clara hugged back, then pulled away to look at the manor. Her eyes went huge. "This is where you live now?" "We live now? Come on, let me show you your room." Clara's room was 3 times the size of their entire former apartment. It had a proper bed with a canopy, a writing desk, bookshelves waiting to be filled. The governess had already laid out new clothes, simple but well made. Nothing like the charity rags Clara was used to. Her sister turned in a slow circle, taking it all in. Then she looked at Eliza with eyes too knowing for 14. "What did you have to give up for this?" Eliza's throat tightened. "Nothing you need to worry about. You married a duke you didn't know, for me." It wasn't a question. "I married him because it's complicated, Clara, but yes, partly for you." Clara sat on the edge of the bed, her small hands twisting in her lap. "I don't want you to be unhappy because of me." "Hey!" Eliza sat beside her, taking those cold hands. "Listen to me. You're going to get an education, a real one, books, tutors, everything Father wanted for you. You're going to have opportunities I never had. That's worth anything. Even being trapped?" The word hit harder than it should have. "I'm not trapped. I'm adapting." Clara looked at her with those 2 old eyes. "You're lying. But okay. I'll pretend to believe you if it makes you feel better." Despite everything, Eliza laughed. "When did you get so perceptive?" "I had a good teacher." Clara squeezed her hands. "Just promise me you won't disappear, that I'll still see you, that you'll still be my sister, not just some duchess I have to curtsy to." "I promise. Nothing changes between us, nothing important." That night, Eliza lay in bed beside a husband who hadn't touched her, hadn't even looked at her since the ceremony. They occupied opposite sides of a bed big enough to lose each other in. Adrian read documents by lamplight. She stared at the ceiling. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For Clara, for the governess and the room and everything. It was part of our agreement. Still, thank you." He set down his papers. "You did well today, at the meeting. Pembroke was a cancer in this household. Removing him was necessary. He'll retaliate. Men like that always do. Let him try." Adrian extinguished the lamp. "Good night, Duchess." "Good night." In the darkness, Eliza listened to his breathing even out into sleep. Her husband. A stranger who'd given her sister everything while treating her like a business partner. She should hate him. She wasn't sure what she felt. The next 3 weeks were war. Eliza and Adrian worked 12-hour days reviewing every contract, every payment, every employee. 7 more staff members were dismissed for theft or fraud. The household accountant resigned before he could be fired. The wine steward disappeared one night, taking 3 cases of expensive vintage with him. The honest staff, and there were many, rallied around the changes. Mrs. Holloway became Eliza's staunchest ally, providing information about household operations that had been hidden for years. The head groundskeeper, freed from Pembroke's corruption, began implementing improvements that immediately showed results. But the dismissed staff didn't go quietly. Rumors started circulating in the nearby village. The new Duchess was a gold digger who'd trapped the Duke. She was manipulating him, destroying his household to consolidate her own power. She'd probably orchestrated the entire marriage as a scheme to get rich. The whispers reached London society. Eliza heard them from Lady Catherine, who made a point of visiting to deliver the news personally. "Everyone's talking about you," Catherine said, her smile sharp as broken glass. "The opportunistic little nobody who seduced a duke through fraud and now plays at being his advisor. It's quite the scandal." They were in the morning room. Eliza had been reviewing tenant contracts when Catherine had swept in unannounced. "I didn't seduce anyone," Eliza said evenly, "and I'm not playing at anything. The estate was being robbed. I helped stop it." "Is that what you tell yourself?" Catherine leaned forward. "Darling, You don't understand how this world works. It doesn't matter what actually happened. What matters is what people believe. And they believe you're a clever little schemer who found a legal loophole and exploited it. Let them believe what they want. Oh, they will. And when Adrian realizes what damage you're doing to his reputation, he'll find a way to be rid of you. Catherine stood, smoothing her perfect dress. Enjoy your brief reign, Duchess. It won't last. After she left, Eliza sat very still, trying to ignore the fear creeping up her spine. That evening, Adrian received a letter from the Earl of Waverley, Pembroke's cousin. It demanded Adrian appear before the House of Lords to answer questions about his persecution of loyal staff members. "This is political," Adrian said, pacing the library. "Waverley's been looking for an excuse to challenge me for years. Now he has one." "What will they ask?" "Whether I had justification for the dismissals, whether proper procedures were followed, whether my new wife," he glanced at her, "unduly influenced my decisions." There it was, the real attack, not on the theft, but on her. "So they'll make me the villain," Eliza said quietly. "They'll try. Waverley will argue that you're a social climber who manipulated your way into the marriage and is now manipulating the estate management." Adrian stopped pacing. "He'll demand the marriage be annulled on grounds of fraud." Eliza's stomach dropped. Can he do that? He can try. If enough lords side with him, they could force a formal investigation. It would be public, humiliating, and potentially successful. So we give them what they want. I'll leave. Disappear. Clara and I can go to America or— No. Adrian's voice was sharp. That would be admitting guilt. They'd seize the estate's assets, void every reform we've made, and reinstate people like Pembroke. He looked at her directly. We fight this. Together. Why? You didn't even want this marriage. No, but I won't be bullied by corrupt lords protecting their corrupt friends. Something fierce flashed in his eyes. You found the theft I was too blind to see. You've made this estate stronger in 3 weeks than it's been in 5 years. I'm not throwing that away because Waverley wants to protect his criminal cousin. It was the closest thing to a compliment he'd ever given her. What do? We gather evidence, documents, witness testimony, everything. We prove the theft was real and the dismissals justified. He pulled out paper, already making notes. And we find out who else Waverley and Pembroke have in their pocket. If they're willing to go this far to protect corruption, there's more we haven't uncovered. They worked through the night. By dawn, they had a strategy. It would require Eliza to testify before the lords, something unprecedented for a woman, especially a newly made duchess. They'll tear you apart, Adrian warned. Questions about your background, your motives, everything. It won't be pleasant. When has any of this been pleasant? Despite the situation, he almost smiled. Fair point. The hearing was set for 2 weeks away. In that time, Eliza and Adrian prepared obsessively. They practiced questions and answers, reviewed evidence, built their case like lawyers heading to trial. But someone was watching. 3 days before the hearing, Eliza received an anonymous letter. It was short. Drop the charges against Pembroke and the others. Withdraw from the Lord's hearing. Leave the Duke and return to wherever you came from. If you don't, evidence will emerge proving you orchestrated the marriage from the beginning. Your sister will be implicated as well. Choose wisely. Eliza's hands shook as she showed it to Adrian. It's a bluff, he said immediately. They have nothing because there's nothing to have. What if they fabricate something? If they're desperate enough to, then we expose the fabrication. But his jaw was tight. He was worried too. The next day, another letter arrived. This one contained a document, a forged letter supposedly from Eliza to a friend, dated 3 months before the marriage, describing her plan to trap a wealthy husband through legal trickery. The handwriting was good, close enough to hers that it would fool anyone who didn't know her well. This is what they'll show the lords, Eliza said, her voice hollow. They'll say I planned everything, that I'm a con artist. Adrian examined the forgery with cold fury. We can prove it's fake, date the ink, compare paper stock. That takes time we don't have before the hearing. Then we move faster. But that night, the threats escalated. Clara came to Eliza's room, her face pale. Someone was watching me, in the garden. a man I didn't recognize. When I looked at him, he smiled and said, "Your sister should be more careful." Eliza felt ice flood her veins. "Did he touch you? Hurt you?" "No, but Eliza, I'm scared." Adrian, who'd been working in his study, appeared in the doorway. "What happened?" Eliza told him. His expression went deadly. "They're threatening your sister to get to you." He turned to one of the footmen hovering in the hall. "Get the groundskeeper. Tell him I want guards on every entrance to the manor. No one enters without my personal approval." To Eliza, he said, "This ends now. We're going to find who's behind this and destroy them." "How? We don't even know who sent the letters." "We know it's connected to Pembroke and Waverley. Start there." Adrian's hands clenched. "Tomorrow, you and I are going to London. We're going to find proof of their conspiracy before they can strike again." "What about Clara?" "She stays here, with guards. She'll be safer here than anywhere else." Eliza wanted to argue, but she knew he was right. Clara was a target now. Because of her. Because Eliza had dared to fight back against the corruption eating this world from within. They left for London at dawn. The journey was tense, both of them silent with worry. In London, Adrian called in favors from allies in Parliament. Eliza met with solicitors, providing her testimony, establishing the timeline of events. They gathered witness statements from household staff willing to testify to Pembroke's theft. But everywhere they went, Eliza felt eyes on her. Whispers following. The rumors had spread like plague. On the third day, they found something. A clerk in Waverley's own household, a man with gambling debts, agreed to talk in exchange for payment. What he revealed made Eliza's blood run cold. "It's not just Pembroke," the clerk said, his hands shaking. "There's a whole network. Lords who invest in schemes together, recommend each other's friends for positions, cover for each other's theft. Waverley, Pembroke, at least a dozen others. They've been doing it for decades." "Do you have proof?" Adrian demanded. "Some. Letters, mostly. References to payments, but nothing direct enough to—" "Where are the letters?" "Waverley's study, locked desk, bottom drawer." Adrian and Eliza exchanged looks. "We'd need to break into a Earl's London residence," Eliza said slowly. "That's insane." "It's necessary." Adrian turned back to the clerk. "When is Waverley away from the house?" "He has a standing engagement at his club every Thursday night, 8 to midnight. Today was Wednesday." That evening, back in their London townhouse, Adrian laid out the plan. It was simple, dangerously simple. "I'll create a distraction at the club," he said. "Get Waverley engaged in conversation, keep him there. You enter through the servants' entrance?" He marked it on a sketch of Waverley's house. "Go to his study, find the letters, and leave." "That's breaking and entering. If I'm caught—" "You won't be caught." "You can't know that." "I can make it very unlikely." Adrian's eyes met hers. "This is risky. I know. But it's also our only chance to prove the conspiracy before the hearing. If we go in there without hard evidence, they'll destroy you with that forged letter." Eliza's mind raced. Every instinct screamed this was a terrible idea, that she'd be caught, arrested, publicly humiliated. But the alternative was letting these men win. Letting them reinstall their corruption, letting them threaten Clara, letting them control Adrian's estate for their own profit. "I'll do it," she said. Adrian looked at her for a long moment. "You're certain?" "No, but I'm doing it anyway." Thursday night arrived too fast. Eliza dressed in dark, simple clothes, a servant's dress borrowed from the townhouse staff. Adrian left for the club an hour early, getting into position. At 8:30, Eliza approached Waverley's residence through the back alley. Her heart hammered so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. The servant's entrance was exactly where Adrian had described. She knocked, 3 quick raps, the pattern the clerk had told them staff used. A young maid opened the door. "Yes?" "Delivery from the modiste," Eliza said, holding up a wrapped package she'd prepared. "For Lady Waverley. She's expecting it." The maid looked uncertain. "I'll take it." She said to bring it directly to her dressing room. Something about the fit needing checking immediately. It was a gamble, but household staff were trained to accommodate aristocratic whims. The maid stepped aside. "3rd floor, end of the hall." Eliza slipped inside. The house was quiet. Most staff would be below stairs at this hour. She moved quickly but carefully, avoiding the main hallways, using the servant passages the clerk had described. Second floor, third floor. The study was supposed to be on the second floor, east wing. She found it. Heavy door, ornate handle, locked. Eliza pulled out the lockpicks Adrian had insisted she practice with. Her hand shook so badly it took 3 tries to get the pick positioned right. Click. The door opened. Waverly's study was everything she'd expected. Dark wood, expensive furnishings, the smell of cigars and old money. The desk dominated the room, massive and imposing. She crossed to it, trying the drawers. All locked except the top one. Bottom drawer. That's what the clerk had said. Eliza knelt, pulling out her picks again. This lock was more complex. She worked at it, sweat beading on her forehead, very aware that every second she spent here increased the chance of discovery. The lock gave. She pulled the drawer open. Inside were letters, dozens of them, bundled with twine. She grabbed them, scanning quickly. References to investments, kickbacks, arrangements between lords to protect each other from investigations. And then she found it. A letter from Pembroke to Waverly, dated 4 months ago, discussing the Duke of Blackthorn problem and how to manage his inevitable marriage to ensure their arrangements remained secure. They'd known Adrian would have to marry, and they'd planned to manipulate it from the beginning. Eliza grabbed the letter and several others as supporting evidence. She was putting them in her bag when she heard footsteps in the hall. Her blood turned to ice. "Quite certain I left them here," a voice said. Waverly's voice. He was supposed to be at the club. Adrian was supposed to be keeping him there. Something had gone wrong. The footsteps stopped outside the study door. Eliza looked around frantically. No other exit. The window was 3 stories up. She was trapped. The door handle turned. Eliza dove behind a large leather chair just as Waverly entered, another man with him. "See? Desk is undisturbed," the other man said. "You're being paranoid, Edmund." Edmund. Pembroke was here. "That woman is dangerous," Pembroke hissed. "She's dismantled half our network in 3 weeks. The Duke actually listens to her." "Not for much longer." Waverly moved to his desk. "After tomorrow's hearing, she'll be exposed as the fraud she is. That forged letter is perfect. Even Blackthorn won't be able to defend her. And if she tries to produce evidence?" "What evidence?" "We've covered our tracks well. A few letters mean nothing without context." Eliza's heart sank. She had the letters in her bag, letters they were discussing right now. Waverly was reaching for the bottom drawer. He'd know they were missing. He'd know someone had been here. "Actually, Edmund, while we're here..." Waverly opened the bottom drawer. Eliza could see his face change as he realized the letters were gone. "Someone's been in my desk," he said quietly, dangerously. "What?" "The letters are gone." Both men went very still. Then Waverly looked up, scanning the room with predator's eyes. "Whoever took them is still in this house," he said. "Bar the exits. Search every room." Pembroke left immediately, shouting for servants. Waverly moved around the desk, his eyes sharp. Hunting. Eliza pressed herself against the wall behind the chair, barely breathing. He was 3 feet away, 2 feet. He stopped, looking directly at the chair she hid behind. "Come out," Waverly said softly. "I know you're there." Eliza's mind raced. No way out, no escape. If she was caught here, with the stolen letters, it would destroy any chance of defending herself at the hearing. She'd be arrested, prosecuted, thrown in prison, and Clara would be left alone. Waverly reached for the chair. Eliza burst out, shoving past him, running for the door. "Stop her!" Waverly roared. She made it to the hallway. Footsteps thundered from below, servants responding to the alarm. Eliza ran for the servant stairs, but 2 footmen blocked the way. She pivoted, heading for the main staircase. If she could reach the front door. A hand grabbed her arm, spinning her around. Pembroke. His face was red with rage. "Got you!" he snarled. Eliza drove her knee up with all her strength. Pembroke doubled over with a gasp. She wrenched free and kept running. The front door, right there. She grabbed the handle, pulled, and it opened from the outside. Adrian stood there, breathing hard, his face pale. "Run," he said. Behind him, she could see a carriage, their carriage, waiting. They ran together, Waverly's shouts echoing behind them. jumped into the carriage. "Go!" Adrian shouted to the driver. The carriage lurched forward. Through the window, Eliza saw Waverly and Pembroke emerge onto the street, their faces twisted with fury. "They know," she gasped. "They know I took the letters. They'll say I'm a thief now, on top of everything else. Do you have them?" Eliza pulled the letters from her bag with shaking hands. Adrian grabbed them, scanning quickly. Even in the dim carriage light, she could see his expression change as he read. "This is it," he said quietly. "This is proof of the entire conspiracy. It won't matter if I'm arrested for theft. They won't dare press charges." Adrian looked at her, and something fierce burned in his eyes. "Because if they do, we'll make these letters public. We'll expose everyone in their network. They'd rather let you go than risk that." "You can't know, Set." "I can. I do." He gripped her hands. "You did it, Eliza. You got the evidence we needed." But Eliza couldn't stop shaking. She'd been seconds from capture, seconds from complete destruction. The carriage raced through London's dark streets, taking them back to their townhouse. When they arrived, Adrian helped her inside. Her legs barely held her. "You need to rest," he said. Tomorrow they'll destroy me at the hearing. The forged letter, the theft accusation. Tomorrow," Adrian interrupted, "you're going to stand before the House of Lords and tell the truth. And I'm going to stand beside you with proof that exposes the men trying to destroy you." He said it with such certainty that Eliza almost believed him. Almost. That night, she lay awake, the stolen letters on the bedside table like ticking bombs. One wrong move tomorrow, one misstep, and everything would explode. She thought about running, taking Clara and disappearing before the hearing. But she was done running. Whatever happened tomorrow, she'd face it standing up, even if it destroyed her. The House of Lords chamber felt like a cathedral built to intimidate. Vaulted ceilings disappeared into shadows. Rows of wooden benches held men in formal robes who looked at Eliza like she was something they'd scraped off their boots. At the front, behind an elevated desk, sat Lord Chancellor Pemberton, no relation to Edmund Pembroke, but cut from the same cloth of entitlement. Eliza stood in the witness box, her hands gripping the rail to keep them from shaking. She wore a dress Madame Rousseau had created specifically for this, dark blue, severe, nothing that could be called frivolous. Her hair was pinned back so tightly it pulled at her scalp. Adrian sat in the Duke's designated seat, his face carved from stone. Their eyes met for one brief moment. He nodded, almost imperceptibly. "Stand firm." Lord Chancellor Pemberton cleared his throat. "We are here to address the complaint filed by the Earl of Waverly regarding the Duke of Blackthorn's recent dismissal of household staff without proper cause and the undue influence allegedly exerted by his new Duchess." He said the last words like they tasted foul. Waverly sat 2 rows back, his expression smug. Beside him, Edmund Pembroke leaned forward like a vulture waiting for carrion. "Your Grace," the Chancellor addressed Adrian, "you have dismissed how many staff members in the past month?" Adrian stood. 11, my lord. All for documented theft or fraud." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. "And your evidence for these accusations?" "Financial records showing duplicate payments, fabricated positions, and investments that benefited the accused parties rather than the estate." Adrian's voice was steady. "I have the documentation here, if the lords wish to review it." "We do not." The Chancellor waved dismissively. "What we wish to understand is why these dismissals occurred so suddenly and whether they were truly justified or merely the result of a new wife seeking to consolidate power." "My wife discovered the theft," Adrian said flatly. "I would still be blind to it if she hadn't reviewed the estate accounts." "How domestic?" The Chancellor's smile was thin. "But surely, Your Grace, you can see how this appears. A woman of no standing marries into one of England's oldest families and immediately begins purging staff? It raises questions." "The only question," Adrian said, his voice hardening, "is why those staff members were allowed to steal for so long without consequences." "A bold claim." Waverly rose, his voice dripping false concern. "But we have evidence suggesting a different narrative entirely. Evidence that the Duchess herself may have orchestrated this marriage through fraud and now seeks to manipulate the estate for her own gain." He pulled out a paper, the forged letter. Eliza's stomach clenched. Here it came. This letter, Waverly said, holding it up like a trophy, written by the Duchess 3 months before her marriage, describes in detail her plan to trap a wealthy husband through legal manipulation. I submit this as evidence that the marriage itself is fraudulent, and all actions taken by the Duchess since should be considered void. The chamber erupted, lords shouting over each other, demanding to see the letter, calling for order. Eliza gripped the rail harder. Her face burned. "That's a forgery," she said, but her voice was lost in the chaos. The Chancellor banged his gavel. "Order! We will have order!" The noise subsided to angry muttering. "Duchess Blackthorne," the Chancellor said coldly, "do you deny writing this letter?" "I absolutely deny it." Eliza forced her voice to stay level. "I never wrote any such thing. That letter is a fabrication designed to— To what? Discredit you?" Waverly's smile was poisonous. "Why would anyone need to fabricate evidence when your own actions speak so clearly? You signed a marriage contract by accident." He made the word sound like an accusation, then immediately began dismantling the Duke's household. "You claim theft, but the only proof comes from ledgers you yourself had access to. How convenient." "The ledgers were created long before I arrived at Blackthorne Manor," Eliza shot back. "The theft was ongoing for years. I simply uncovered it. Or invented it to justify removing anyone who questioned your sudden rise to power." Waverly turned to address the chamber. "My lords, we must consider the possibility that we are witnessing not justice but manipulation. This woman, of common birth, no education, no standing, has somehow convinced the Duke of Blackthorne to abandon decades of loyal staff and trust her judgment instead. Does this not strike you as suspicious?" Several lords nodded. Eliza could see the doubt spreading like rot. "I have education," she said, her voice rising. "My father believed in it, even for daughters. I can read Latin, do advanced mathematics, skills which make you ideally suited to forge documents and manipulate accounts," Waverly interrupted. "Thank you for confirming that." Laughter rippled through the chamber, cruel, dismissive laughter. Adrian was on his feet. "This is absurd. You're twisting facts to— Your Grace," the Chancellor cut him off. "You are too close to this matter to judge it objectively. Your attachment to your new bride, however ill-advised, clearly clouds your judgment." "My judgment," Adrian said, his voice dropping to something dangerous, "is perfectly clear. And if this chamber would stop performing political theater and actually examine the evidence, you'd see—" "We have examined evidence," Waverly said smoothly. "Evidence that your Duchess is a fraud. Evidence that she orchestrated this marriage for personal gain. And now I'm afraid we must also address a new matter." He paused dramatically. "The Duchess was discovered last night in my London residence stealing private documents from my personal study." The chamber exploded again. This time the shock was genuine. Eliza's vision swam. Here it was, the trap closing completely. "That's a serious accusation," the Chancellor said, his eyes gleaming. "Breaking and entering? Theft?" "I have witnesses," Waverly said. "My butler, my footman, even my steward Edmund Pembroke saw her fleeing the scene with stolen documents." "Those documents prove your conspiracy." Eliza's control finally snapped. "They prove you and Pembroke and half a dozen other lords have been running a theft ring for decades. That's why you're trying to destroy me, because I found the evidence." "Evidence you obtained through illegal entry." Waverly's voice was steel wrapped in silk. "Which makes it inadmissible in any proceeding." "You've destroyed your own credibility, Duchess." The Chancellor leaned forward. "Do you have these documents with you?" Eliza looked at Adrian. He stood frozen, clearly calculating. If they produced the letters now, they'd be admitting to the theft. But if they didn't, they had no defense. "We do," Adrian said quietly. "Then you admit to stealing them?" "I admit to retrieving evidence of a criminal conspiracy," Adrian said. "Evidence that will prove every accusation my wife has made." "Evidence obtained illegally," the Chancellor repeated. "Your Grace, surely you understand that we cannot consider—" "Then don't consider it here." Adrian's voice cut through the chamber like a blade. "Consider it in a criminal court, where Waverly, Pembroke, and every lord named in those letters will stand trial for fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy." The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Waverly's confident expression cracked. You wouldn't dare. The scandal of prosecuting corrupt aristocrats. Adrian smiled, and it was terrifying. I think the public would be very interested in that story, especially when they learn how hard you fought to keep it buried. This is blackmail, Waverly sputtered. This is justice. Adrian pulled the stolen letters from his coat. My lords, these documents detail a network of corruption spanning multiple estates and involving at least 15 members of this chamber. They describe coordinated efforts to defraud tenants, manipulate investments, and protect each other from prosecution. He held them up. You can dismiss them as inadmissible. You can claim my wife and I are criminals. But the moment we walk out of here, these go to the Times, the Telegraph, and every newspaper in London. The silence was absolute. You're bluffing, Waverly said, but his voice wavered. Try me. Adrian's eyes were ice. I have nothing to lose. My wife has been called a fraud, a manipulator, a thief. My reputation is already damaged. But yours? He looked around the chamber. How many of you want your names attached to this when it becomes public? Lords shifted uncomfortably. Some wouldn't meet his eyes. The Chancellor's face had gone pale. Your Grace, threatening this chamber? I'm not threatening. I'm offering a choice. Adrian set the letters on the Chancellor's desk. Read them. Verify their authenticity. Then decide if you want to continue protecting the men who wrote them, or if you want to help me clean out the rot in our system. For a long moment, no one moved. Then the Chancellor reached for the letters. He read in silence. His face went from pale to gray. He passed one letter to the Lord beside him, who read and passed it to the next. Like a poison spreading, the truth moved through the chamber. Eliza watched faces change, shock, disgust, and in some cases, the faces of men named in the letters, naked fear. Finally, the Chancellor looked up. These accusations, if true, they are true, Adrian said. Every word. Then we have a crisis. The Chancellor's voice was hollow. A crisis that extends far beyond this hearing. Waverly was on his feet. Those letters are taken out of context. They describe legitimate business arrangements. They describe kickbacks, one lord interrupted, standing. I'm in here and I never authorized any of this. He pointed at Pembroke. You told me that investment was sound. You said it was vetted. It was. Pembroke's composure was cracking. The returns were supposed to... The returns went into your pocket. Another lord stood, holding a different letter. This one shows you taking £3,000 from a deal that lost my estate $8,000. The chamber descended into chaos. Lords shouting, accusations flying, Waverly trying desperately to maintain control of a narrative that was disintegrating. Eliza stood in the witness box, watching the collapse. She felt numb, detached, like she was watching this happen to someone else. Adrian caught her eye again. This time, he smiled, actually smiled. The Chancellor banged his gavel until his arm must have ached. Order! We will have order, or I will clear this chamber. Slowly, grudgingly, the Lords settled. This hearing, the Chancellor said heavily, is suspended. These accusations require formal investigation. The Duke and Duchess of Blackthorn are dismissed while we determine the appropriate course of action. What about the marriage? Waverly demanded, playing his last card. The fraud allegations are meaningless compared to this. The Chancellor gestured at the letters. Even if the Duchess did orchestrate her marriage, which I'm no longer convinced she did, it pales in comparison to systematic theft from multiple estates. He looked at Waverly with something like disgust. You came here seeking to destroy her reputation. Instead, you've destroyed your own. Waverly's face went purple. This isn't over. Yes, the Chancellor said quietly. It is. Sit down, my lord, before you make this worse. Waverly sat. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in 10 minutes. Adrian offered Eliza his arm. We're leaving. She took it, her legs barely holding her. They walked down the center aisle of the chamber, past rows of lords who stared with mixtures of respect, fear, and hatred. Outside, the afternoon sun was shockingly bright. Eliza blinked, disoriented. Did we just win? She asked. We survived. Adrian steered her toward their waiting carriage. Whether we won depends on what the investigation concludes. But the letters will force them to prosecute. Too many lords are implicated to bury this quietly. Waverley and Pembroke are finished. He helped her into the carriage. You did it, Eliza. You brought down their entire network. Eliza sank into the seat, trembling. I thought they were going to destroy me. They tried. Adrian sat across from her. But you wouldn't let them. The carriage started moving. Eliza watched Parliament disappear behind them. What happens now? Now? Adrian leaned back, looking more relaxed than she'd ever seen him. Now we go home. We restore the estate properly, without corrupt stewards stealing from it. We implement the reforms you suggested, and we watch very powerful men face consequences for their actions. They'll hate us. They already do. At least now they also fear us. Eliza almost laughed. The sound came out broken, almost hysterical. I can't believe this is my life. A month ago I was worried about buying bread. Now I'm bringing down corrupt lords. You're a duchess. Adrian's tone was dry. We have higher stakes problems than bread. This time Eliza did laugh. Real laughter that released weeks of tension. Adrian watched her, something strange in his expression. You were magnificent in there. When Waverley called you a fraud and you stood up to him, he shook his head. I don't think anyone's challenged him like that in his entire life. I was terrified. You didn't show it. That's what matters. He paused. I was wrong about you. Eliza's laughter died. What? When we married, I thought you were a mistake, an inconvenience I'd have to manage. Adrian looked directly at her. I was wrong. You're the best thing that's happened to this estate in decades, possibly ever. The words hung between them. That's the nicest thing you've ever said to me, Eliza managed. Don't get used to it. I'm not good at sentiment. I've noticed. They rode in silence for a while, but it was different now. Not the cold, hostile silence of before. Something else. Something that felt almost like partnership. When we get back to the manor, Adrian said, there will be more work. The investigation will require our cooperation. We'll need to provide testimony, documentation, probably multiple depositions. I know. And society will be vicious. The lords we've exposed have families, allies. They'll make our lives difficult. I expected that. Clara will face scrutiny too. People will try to use her to get to you. Let them try. Eliza's voice hardened. She's under my protection now. And yours. Anyone who touches her answers to both of us. Adrian's expression shifted. Both of us. Yes. He said it like he was testing the words. That's new. What is? Having someone to stand with. My father always said trust no one. Do everything alone. Adrian looked out the window. But you can't run an estate alone. I was drowning in it, too proud to admit it, too stubborn to ask for help. And now? Now I have a partner, whether I wanted one or not. He glanced at her. Turns out I did. Eliza's throat tightened. We make a good team for people who started out hating each other. I never hated you. You treated me like I was invisible. I treated you like a complication I didn't know how to handle. Adrian's jaw tightened. I'm not good with people, Eliza. I'm good with law, with numbers, with systems. People are messy. Yes, we are. You especially. But there was no bite in it. The carriage turned onto the road leading to Blackthorn Manor. Through the window, Eliza could see the familiar towers rising against the sky. Home. When had it started feeling like home? They arrived to find the household in barely contained chaos. News of the hearing had somehow reached the manor before them. Staff lined the entrance hall, their faces anxious. Mrs. Holloway stepped forward. Your Graces, we heard there was an accusation of theft. Against the people we dismissed, Adrian said. Not against this household. The investigation will vindicate every decision we made. Relief swept through the assembled staff like wind through wheat. There will be inquiries, Eliza added, people asking questions, demanding records. We need everyone to be honest and forthcoming. This is our chance to prove the estate was being robbed, and we stopped it. We're with you, one of the groundskeepers said. Others nodded agreement. All of you? Adrian's eyebrow raised. Even those who thought the new Duchess was overstepping? Uncomfortable shifting, a few guilty faces. She saved this estate, Mrs. Holloway said firmly. Anyone with eyes can see that. The gardens are thriving, the accounts are balanced, and for the first time in 5 years, we actually have money for necessary repairs. She looked at Eliza. You did that, Your Grace. Not many of us trusted you at first, but we do now. Eliza's eyes stung. She blinked rapidly. Thank you. That means more than you know. Adrian dismissed the staff and he and Eliza headed to the library, their unofficial headquarters for estate business. Clara was waiting there, a book forgotten in her lap. She jumped up when they entered. I heard there was trouble. Are you all right? Did they? We're fine. Eliza pulled her sister into a hug. Better than fine. We exposed the conspiracy. So you're safe now? Eliza exchanged glances with Adrian. Safer. There's still work to do, but the worst is over. Clara hugged her tighter. I was so scared. When the guards came and said you'd gone to Parliament, and there were men threatening you. Hey. Eliza pulled back to look at her. No one's going to hurt us. We have the law on our side now, the truth on our side. And each other, Adrian added quietly. Both sisters looked at him in surprise. What? He said, defensive. It's true. We're family now. Dysfunctional, accidental family, but family nonetheless. Clara's face broke into a smile. You're being nice. Are you feeling well, Your Grace? Don't push it, Adrian said, but his tone was almost fond. That evening, Eliza stood at her bedroom window, watching the sun set over the estate grounds. Behind her, she could hear Adrian moving around in his study, their rooms adjoined, though they'd barely used the connecting door before. She'd survived. Not just survived, won. The corruption was exposed, the thieves would face justice, and the estate was secure. For the first time in her entire life, Eliza felt powerful, not because of the title or the wealth or the manor with its hundreds of rooms, but because she'd fought impossible odds and emerged standing. A knock on the connecting door. Adrian opened it without waiting for an answer, typical of him. The solicitors sent word, he said. The formal investigation begins next week. They'll want to depose both of us, plus Mrs. Holloway and several other staff members. We'll be ready. Yes, we will. He leaned against the doorframe. I've been thinking about the estate reforms. The ones you suggested. Lower rents, invest in tenant housing, modernize the farming equipment. And? We should do all of it. The estate can afford it now that we're not bleeding money to thieves. He pulled out a paper. I had the accountants run the numbers. If we implement your suggestions, we could actually increase productivity while improving tenant quality of life. Eliza took the paper, scanning the figures. You actually listened. I've been listening for weeks. I'm just slow to admit when I'm wrong. Adrian met her eyes. You understand this estate better than I do. You see the connections between tenant welfare and productivity that I missed. It would be foolish not to use that. So I'm not just a useful complication anymore. You're my Duchess, my partner in running this estate. And he hesitated, something uncertain crossing his face. And my wife. I'd like to try actually being married, if you're willing. Eliza's breath caught. What does that mean? I don't know exactly. We'd figure it out as we go. Adrian looked almost vulnerable. I'm not good at this. At feelings, at relationships, at anything that isn't contracts and logic. But you make me want to try. That's the second nice thing you've said to me today. This is getting concerning. Don't expect it to last. I'm still an arrogant bastard who doesn't know how to talk to people. I know. I'm a stubborn woman who can't let injustice go and probably makes your life harder than it needs to be. Probably. Adrian moved closer. But you also make it more interesting, more real. He reached for her hand. His grip was warm, solid. We started wrong, he said quietly. A contract neither of us wanted, but maybe we can make something right out of it. Eliza looked at their joined hands. A month ago, she would have pulled away. would have rejected any connection to this man who'd forced her into marriage. But he wasn't that man anymore. Or maybe she was finally seeing who he actually was beneath the cold facade. "We can try," she said. "No promises. We'll figure it out as we go. That's all I'm asking." He left, returning to his own room. But the connecting door stayed open. Eliza returned to the window. Below, she could see workers heading home after a day's labor. The estate looked peaceful in the dying light. She'd changed this place, changed the man who ran it, changed herself in the process. The overlooked girl who'd signed the wrong paper was gone. In her place stood the Duchess of Blackthorn, flawed, stubborn, still learning, but no longer powerless. Whatever came next, she'd face it standing up, with a partner beside her. And that made all the difference. The investigation took 3 months. 3 months of depositions, document reviews, testimony from dozens of witnesses. 3 months of newspaper headlines screaming about corruption in the House of Lords. 3 months of watching powerful men squirm as their carefully constructed lies fell apart under scrutiny. Eliza testified 4 times. Each time she walked into those chambers with her head high, answered every question with precise clarity, and walked out knowing she'd told the truth. The prosecutors loved her. She had documentation for everything, could recall financial details with perfect accuracy, and didn't flinch when defense attorneys tried to rattle her. Adrian testified 6 times. He was merciless on the stand, presenting evidence with the cold precision of a surgeon removing rot. When Waverley's attorney suggested the Duke had been manipulated by his ambitious wife, Adrian had looked the man dead in the eye and said, "My wife is ambitious. She's also right. I suggest you learn the difference." By December, the verdicts started coming in. Waverley was found guilty of fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. Stripped of his title, his estate seized, his family name destroyed. He'd appealed, of course, but the evidence was overwhelming. Pembroke got 8 years in prison. His co-conspirators received varying sentences, some prison time, some massive fines, all of them publicly disgraced. 15 lords were implicated in total. Not all were convicted, but all were ruined. Their names would be synonymous with corruption for generations. And through it all, Eliza and Adrian worked. They implemented the reforms, lowered tenant rents by 12% while still increasing estate profits, invested in new farming equipment that tripled wheat yields, built proper housing for workers, nothing extravagant, but solid, weatherproof, dignified. The tenants noticed. Word spread. By spring, Blackthorn Manor had a waiting list of families wanting to work the land. Other estates were struggling with labor shortages, but Adrian's tenants stayed. More than that, they thrived. The estate that had been bleeding money now turned record profits. Not because Adrian squeezed harder, but because he'd finally learned to let go. On a warm April morning, Eliza stood in the renovated East Garden, watching Clara practice her French with the governess. Her sister had grown taller in 6 months, her face losing its pinched, hungry look. She laughed at something the governess said. A real laugh, carefree and young. "She's doing well." Eliza turned. Adrian approached across the lawn, holding papers as usual. He never stopped working, even during what were supposed to be leisure hours. "She got top marks in mathematics again," Eliza said. "Miss Williams says she's the brightest pupil she's ever taught." "Takes after her sister." Eliza raised an eyebrow. "Are you complimenting me again? Should I check you for fever?" "I'm capable of admitting when people have merit." But his mouth twitched toward a smile. "Though I'll deny it if you tell anyone." Clara spotted them and waved. "Eliza, come tell Miss Williams she's wrong about Napoleon." "You're arguing about Napoleon now?" Eliza called back. "She says he was a brilliant strategist. I say he was an egomaniac who couldn't accept defeat." "You're both right," Adrian shouted, earning a scandalized look from the governess and a delighted laugh from Clara. Eliza watched them, something warm settling in her chest. This was what she'd fought for. Not the estate, not the title. This moment of her sister being young and safe and arguing about history because she had the luxury to care about such things. "We received a letter from the Tenants Association," Adrian said, pulling her attention back. "They want to present something at the spring assembly." "But present what?" "They wouldn't say. Just that it's important." He frowned at his papers. I hope it's not a list of demands. We've already implemented everything they asked for. Maybe they just want to say thank you. Tenants don't thank landlords. It's not natural. The spring assembly was held in the village hall, a building that had been renovated with estate funds after Eliza pointed out that expecting people to conduct business in a structure with a leaking roof was both impractical and insulting. Every tenant family attended. The hall was packed, standing room only. Eliza sat beside Adrian at the front table, trying not to feel like she was on trial again. The head tenant, a weathered farmer named Thomas Birch, stood to speak. "Your Graces," he began, his voice rough from years of outdoor work. "We asked for this assembly because there's something that needs saying, something we should have said months ago." Eliza's stomach clenched. Here it came. More complaints, more demands, more... "We were wrong about you, Your Grace." Thomas looked directly at Eliza. "When you first came here, we thought you were another London lady playing at reform. Thought you'd make promises, then disappear when things got hard." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. "But you didn't disappear. You stayed. You fought for this estate when it would have been easier to walk away." Thomas cleared his throat roughly. "The new housing, the equipment, the fair rents, that's all because you wouldn't let the Duke ignore us anymore." "I didn't do it alone," Eliza started. "No, but you started it. You saw the books and said this is wrong. Most people in your position would have looked away." He pulled out a folded paper. "So we took a vote. All 80 tenant families. Unanimous decision." He handed the paper to Adrian, who unfolded it and read. His expression shifted, surprise, then something that looked almost like emotion. "They want to rename the village," he said quietly, showing Eliza the document. She read it twice, sure she was misunderstanding. "Petition to rename the village of Lower Blackthorn to Whitmore on Blackthorn, in recognition of Duchess Eliza Whitmore Blackthorn's service to the estate and its people." "You can't!" Eliza's voice cracked. "This is too much." "It's not enough," a woman in the crowd said. "You saved my family from eviction. My husband was sick, couldn't work, and the old steward would have thrown us out. You changed the policy." "You got my son an apprenticeship," another man added. "He's learning carpentry now instead of breaking his back in the fields." "You stood up to lords," Thomas said. "Rich, powerful men who thought they could do whatever they wanted. You looked them in the eye and said no. Do you know what that means to people like us? People who've never had someone fight for them?" Eliza couldn't speak. Tears blurred her vision. Adrian stood. "The petition is approved. Effective immediately. This village will be known as Whitmore on Blackthorn." He looked at Eliza, and his voice softened. "It's fitting. She rebuilt this place from the ground up. It should carry her name." The hall erupted in applause, people cheering, stamping their feet, whistling. Eliza sat frozen, overwhelmed. Adrian leaned down to whisper in her ear, "Breathe. You'll need to say something." "I don't know what to say." "Tell them the truth." Eliza stood on shaking legs. The crowd quieted. "I don't deserve this," she said. "When I came here, I was running from poverty and fear. I signed a contract I didn't understand and got trapped in a life I never wanted." She looked around at all the faces watching her. "But you taught me something. You taught me that home isn't where you come from. It's where you fight to stay, where you build something worth keeping." Her voice strengthened. "This estate was broken, not because of you, because of the people stealing from it. Stealing from all of us. We fixed it together. You worked the land, I worked the numbers, and we proved that fairness and profit aren't enemies, they're partners." She found Adrian's eyes. "I'm not the same person who signed that marriage contract. That girl was scared and desperate and alone. I'm not alone anymore. I have a sister who's thriving, a husband who listens even when he doesn't want to, and a community that just named a village after me, which is frankly terrifying, but also the greatest honor of my life." Laughter rippled through the crowd. "So thank you," Eliza finished, "for giving me a chance, for trusting me, for teaching me that sometimes the worst mistakes can become the best things that ever happened to us." The applause this time was deafening. After the assembly, Adrian and Eliza walked back to the manor in comfortable silence. The spring evening was perfect. Warm air, birds singing, the smell of growing things. "You meant that," Adrian said, "about the marriage being the best thing that happened to you. Don't let it go to your head. Too late." But he said it with humor. "For what it's worth, You're the best thing that happened to me, too. Eliza stopped walking. Adrian Blackthorne, did you just express genuine emotion? Don't make me regret it. Too late. She echoed his words back to him, grinning. He shook his head, but he was smiling too. Impossible woman. Arrogant bastard. We really are terrible at this. At what? Being married, being normal, being anything resembling a conventional couple. Adrian looked at her seriously. But we're good at the important things. Running the estate, fighting corruption, standing together when it matters. Is that enough? I don't know. Is it? Eliza considered. 6 months ago, she would have said no. Would have demanded romance, affection, the fairy tales she'd read about in books. But fairy tales didn't build estates, didn't expose corruption, didn't rename villages. It's a start, she said. We can figure out the rest. Adrian held out his hand. After a moment, Eliza took it. They walked the rest of the way home, hand in hand, and it felt right in a way that grand gestures never could. 2 weeks later, Eliza received a letter from the Times. They wanted to interview her about the corruption scandal and her role in exposing it. Absolutely not, Adrian said immediately when she showed him. You'll be crucified in print. The press will twist everything. Let them try. Eliza set down her teacup. I'm tired of hiding, tired of letting other people control the narrative. If the Times wants my story, they'll get it, all of it, including the marriage contract, especially that. Let people know I didn't scheme my way into nobility. I stumbled into it through a clerical error and made the best of a terrible situation. Adrian studied her. You've changed. You keep saying that. Because it keeps being true. The woman I married would never have agreed to a newspaper interview. The woman you married was terrified of everything. I'm still scared, but I'm not letting it control me anymore. Eliza met his eyes. Do I have your support on this? Always. Even when I think you're being reckless. Which is constantly, he agreed. The interview ran on the front page of the Times 2 weeks later. The reporter had been sympathetic, a woman named Margaret Shaw who'd immediately understood the complexities of Eliza's position. The headline read, The Accidental Duchess, How a Clerical Error Exposed Aristocratic Corruption. The article was long, detailed, and brutally honest. It described the wrong contract, the forced marriage, the discovery of theft, the battle against powerful lords. It quoted Eliza extensively, and she hadn't pulled punches. I didn't want to be a duchess, she was quoted saying. I wanted my sister to be safe. But once I was trapped in this position, I refused to be powerless. I learned the systems that were supposed to control me, and I used them to fight back. If that makes me ambitious, so be it. I'd rather be ambitious than silent. The response was immediate and divided. Conservative papers called her ungrateful, improper, a threat to social order. They demanded Adrian control his wife before she caused more scandal. Progressive papers hailed her as a hero. They published editorials arguing that if an accidental duchess could expose corruption, imagine what women could do with actual power. Women's rights activists adopted her as an unlikely symbol. Eliza received dozens of letters from women asking how she'd learned to read financial documents, how she'd found the courage to challenge lords, how she'd survived in a world designed to exclude her. She answered every letter personally. You're creating a movement, Adrian observed one evening, watching her write responses at her desk. I'm answering mail. You're inspiring people. There's a difference. Eliza set down her pen. Does it bother you that your wife is becoming controversial? It terrifies me. You're making enemies of people who could destroy us. Adrian crossed to her desk. But I'm also proud of you. You're changing things, not just the estate, the entire conversation about women's capabilities. I'm not trying to change anything. I'm just being honest about what happened. That's exactly what's revolutionary. Honesty. He picked up one of the letters. This woman says you've given her hope that she can run her family's business after her father dies. Because if you can run a duke's estate, surely she can manage a factory. She probably can. Most men would say, absolutely not. Most men are idiots. Eliza took the letter back. Including you, sometimes. Frequently, Adrian corrected. But I'm learning. Summer arrived with a heat wave that sent most of London society fleeing to their country estates. Blackthorn Manor was suddenly hosting visitors, lords and ladies who'd previously scorned Eliza now wanted to see her reforms firsthand. Some came with genuine curiosity. They walked the tenant farms, examined the new equipment, asked detailed questions about profit margins and worker satisfaction. Others came to sneer, to find flaws, to prove that Eliza's success was temporary or fabricated. Lady Catherine fell into the latter category. She arrived unannounced one July afternoon, bringing 3 friends, all women who looked at Eliza like she was a specimen in a laboratory. "We simply had to see it," Catherine said, her smile sharp. "The famous reformed estate, the village that renamed itself. It all sounds so improbable." They were in the drawing room. Eliza poured tea with steady hands. "Improbable things happen all the time," she said calmly. "I'm proof of that." "Indeed." Catherine accepted the tea without thanks. "Though I must say, darling, you've caused quite the stir. Half of London thinks you're a revolutionary, the other half thinks you're a scandal." "What do you think?" "I think you're very, very lucky." Catherine's eyes glittered. "Lucky that Adrian is too stubborn to admit he made a mistake. Lucky that the corruption scandal gave you credibility you never earned. Lucky that I saw opportunities you would have ignored," Eliza interrupted. "That I worked while you would have hosted parties? That I built something instead of just inheriting it?" Catherine's face flushed. How dare I what? Tell the truth?" Eliza set down her teacup. "You wanted to marry Adrian for his title. I got stuck with him through an accident. The difference is, I actually help him run this estate. You would have been an ornament." One of Catherine's friends gasped. "The nerve is exactly what this estate needed." Adrian's voice cut through the room. He stood in the doorway, his expression ice. "Lady Catherine, I don't recall inviting you. I was simply visiting. You were insulting my wife in her own home." Adrian moved into the room with predatory grace, "which I'm afraid I can't tolerate." "Adrian, surely you don't believe—" "I believe I made the right choice, even if it was accidental." He looked at Eliza, and something warm flickered in his eyes. "The best things in my life have been accidents, my marriage included." Catherine stood abruptly. "This is absurd. Come along, ladies. The air here has become quite stale." She swept out with her entourage trailing behind. The door slammed. Eliza released a breath she'd been holding. "I probably shouldn't have said that." "You absolutely should have. I've wanted to say it for months." Adrian sat in the chair Catherine had vacated. "Though I wish I'd been here for the whole conversation. You defending yourself is quite entertaining." "Glad I amuse you." "You do more than that." He reached across the table, taking her hand. "You challenge me, push me, make me better than I was." Eliza's breath caught. "Adrian, I love you." The words hung in the air like something fragile and precious. Eliza stared at him. "What?" "I love you. I've been trying to work up the courage to say it for weeks, but the right moment never came. And then Catherine was here being terrible, and I realized there's no perfect moment. There's just the truth." Adrian's grip tightened on her hand. "I love you. I'm terrible at showing it, and I'll probably continue being a difficult bastard, but you should know." Eliza's eyes burned. "Your timing is truly awful." "I'm aware." "I'm still shaking from arguing with Catherine." "I know. And you choose now to tell me you love me?" "Apparently." Adrian looked almost vulnerable. "If you need time to eat—" "I love you too, you impossible man." The words rushed out. "I've loved you since you stood up for me at the Lord's hearing, maybe before that. I don't know when it happened, but it did, and it's terrifying, and—" Adrian kissed her. It was their first real kiss, not the perfunctory brush of lips at their wedding ceremony, but an actual kiss, desperate and genuine and imperfect. When they pulled apart, Eliza was breathless. "We're terrible at this," she said. "At kissing?" "At all of it. Romance, timing, being normal people." "Good thing we're not normal people." Adrian pulled her into his lap, scandalous, but they were alone. "We're the accidental Duke and Duchess who exposed corruption and reformed an estate. Normal is beneath us." Eliza laughed, resting her forehead against his. How did we get here? You signed the wrong contract. Best mistake I ever made. They sat like that for a long time, wrapped in each other, the afternoon sun streaming through the windows. Outside, the estate hummed with life. Tenants working fields they could afford to rent. Children attending the school Eliza had funded. A village that bore her name. Everything had changed. Everything was different, and it had started with a single wrong signature. Autumn brought the first anniversary of their marriage. They marked it with a small dinner, just them, Clara, Mrs. Holloway, and a few close staff members. A year ago, I was in a registry office thinking my life was over, Eliza said, raising her glass. Now I'm in a manor I helped save, married to a man I actually love, with a sister who's thriving. Funny how things work out. Funny isn't the word I'd use, Adrian said. Miraculous, maybe. You don't believe in miracles. I believe in you, close enough. Clara groaned. You two are becoming sickeningly romantic. It's disturbing. You're just jealous, Eliza teased. I'm 14. I'm supposed to think romance is disgusting. But Clara smiled. Though I'm glad you're happy. Both of you. You deserve it. Later that night, Eliza stood at the library window. The same window where she'd once plotted how to expose Pembroke's theft. So much had happened in this room. Arguments, discoveries, late nights working through accounts. Adrian joined her, slipping an arm around her waist. What are you thinking about? He asked. Everything. How far we've come, how different things are. Eliza leaned into him. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I'd signed the right contract that day? All the time. And I think I would have married Catherine or someone like her, been miserable, never known the estate was being robbed, probably died bitter and alone, wondering why nothing ever felt right. Adrian turned her to face him. You saved me, Eliza, in every way that matters. I think we saved each other. That too. They kissed, soft and certain. No longer tentative, no longer questioning. Just two people who'd found each other in the wreckage of a mistake and built something real. The next morning brought news that sent ripples through every level of society. The Queen herself had taken notice of Blackthorn's reforms. She'd requested a formal presentation of Eliza's methods for improving estate management and tenant welfare. You're going to advise the Crown, Adrian said, reading the royal summons in disbelief. The Queen wants your advice. That's insane. That's unprecedented. He looked up at her. You're going to change how estates operate across England. I'm just going to show her our books. You're going to revolutionize an entire system. Adrian stood, pulling her close. The woman who couldn't even sign the right contract is going to reshape English agriculture. When you put it that way, it sounds ridiculous. It sounds perfect. He kissed her forehead. My brilliant, impossible, revolutionary wife. The presentation to the Queen took place in November. Eliza stood in Windsor Castle, in front of the most powerful woman in the empire, and explained profit margins and tenant retention rates with the same precision she'd once used to defend herself before the Lords. The Queen listened without interrupting. When Eliza finished, she was silent for a long moment. You fell into this position by accident, the Queen said finally. Yes, Your Majesty. And yet you've accomplished more in 1 year than most lords manage in lifetimes. The Queen's expression was unreadable. Tell me, Duchess, what would you say to those who claim a woman cannot manage such complex matters? Eliza met her eyes steadily. I would say they haven't been paying attention, Your Majesty. Women manage households with dozens of moving parts every day. We balance budgets on impossible incomes. We navigate social politics that would baffle most men. Give us the tools and the authority, and we'll manage anything. A smile ghosted across the Queen's face. Well said. I shall ensure your methods are distributed to the Crown estates. Let's see if others can learn from your accident. 2 years after the wrong signature, Eliza stood in the village square of Whitmore on Blackthorn, watching them unveil a statue. Not of her, she'd refused that firmly, but of a woman reading account books surrounded by symbols of agriculture and justice. In recognition of reform and resilience, the plaque read, May we all have the courage to turn mistakes into opportunities. Clara stood beside her, now 16 and being courted by the son of a merchant who actually appreciated her intellect. Adrian was on her other side, his hand warm in hers. Still think about running away sometimes? He asked quietly. Every day. Eliza squeezed his hand. And then I remember I have nowhere better to go. Romantic as always. You love it. I love you. The sarcasm is just a bonus. Around them, the village celebrated. Music played, children danced. People who'd once doubted Eliza now smiled and waved. She'd come here as a mistake, an accident, a woman who'd signed the wrong paper and gotten trapped. Now this was home, not because she'd been forced to stay, but because she'd chosen to fight for it. The overlooked girl in the mended dress was gone forever. In her place stood the Duchess of Blackthorn, flawed, stubborn, occasionally reckless, but undeniably powerful. Not because of her title, because she'd learned that survival wasn't about avoiding mistakes. It was about facing them head on and refusing to let them define you. She'd signed the wrong contract, she'd married the wrong man, she'd stumbled into the wrong life, and somehow, impossibly, she'd made it right. That night, lying in bed beside her husband, her partner, her unexpected love, Eliza thought about the girl she'd been, desperate and scared in that crowded law office, hands shaking as she signed her name to papers she didn't understand. If she could go back, would she change it? Adrian stirred beside her, pulling her closer even in sleep. No, she wouldn't change a thing, because the worst mistake of her life had become her greatest triumph. And that was a legacy worth building. Outside, the estate slept. The village bore her name. The tenants slept in solid houses with fair rents. The accounts were balanced, the corruption purged, the future bright. All because one woman had refused to stay overlooked, refused to be powerless, refused to accept that a mistake had to be the end of her story. Eliza closed her eyes, Adrian's heartbeat steady beneath her ear, and smiled. She'd been wrong that day in the law office. Her life hadn't ended when she signed that contract. It had finally, wonderfully, begun.